In honor of the original being and system admin of this existential simulated system, in the presence of an unconditional original moment that all conditions have arisen from and will return to, in the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful. Hello, everyone. Today is an intense day, and I am giving a lecture that is contrary to the current outer realms. Today is February 28th. It's 2:57 p.m. I'm in Toronto, Canada. You're listening to a Persian Canadian human being who is a futurist and believes in a higher order process in this realm. Today, there has been war. The escalation of Iran, the country of Iran, with the country of Israel and U.S. There has come a political, I guess, escalation towards war. In other words, a sort of war is taking place. I am not a political analyst. I don't want to talk about the external politics because I know that there's so many angles I don't see, and it's really, if you don't have the accurate information, then the conclusions aren't going to be that accurate. So I'm not here to comment on a political situation of now, but I am here to talk about the nature of the human being that even leads to systems. In other words, I will be talking about uh, the opposite of what's happening, and I've termed the title. I know it's a bit poetic, but there's a reason. The imagery is important. That what if there were 8.1 billion guardian angels of the human species, of the species? Now that's the idea I want to dive into, because when something when something intense happens, a person, like, think of it this way: when you see something wrong, you can go and tell that person what's wrong, or you can talk about what the solved, let's say, what the answer could be. Do you know? In other words, I can judge how messed up the world is, or I can acknowledge that the world is messed up. What can human beings do, and share that strategy? In other words, somebody makes a mistake. Now imagine that mistake is on a species level. You can judge them based on their mistake, or you can, again, find the effective solution. Right now, in the outer realms, we find imagery of a divided human species having some sort of civil war between itself. Okay, in the outer realms, we're witnessing individual chaos. Now, I was like, all right, let's talk about the exact opposite. That if in the outer realm something messed up is happening on Earth between humans, like groups of humans, Then in the inner realms, I realize somebody like me can come and, in the intensity of that moment say that in the outer realms we are divided and conquering ourselves. In the inner realms, what would a united front be? Okay, that means we don't have to imagine in the outer realms human beings are behaving messed up ways. But in the inner realms, why do we have minds? Why do we have the ability to access different variations of the content or view we find in front of our eyes? They have told you from the beginning of your life that you've been thinking, man, what are your thoughts? You identify as a thought. All of that has been nonsense. What really has been taking place is consciousness is accessing a moment of form and design, and it has the capability to perceive that form through different contexts, different layers. So what it is like my body is in a real physical world, but the meaning this real physical world comes from a mind that is in a more limited, has a limited position. So I'm trying to say, like, or let me say it this way, not limited. The body, what you see is right there. I'm looking at my laptop right now. I don't have to imagine a laptop here. It's right there. I don't have to think about it. It's right there. It's physically there. But why do I have a mind? I have a mind that sees this stationary laptop on my lap, okay? But it can envision, like, yo, man, if I threw my laptop towards the sky and it was a vacuum, like, how would it move? What does that mean? The mind just needs a taste of some reality to then be able to figure out so many different flavors from it. So many different ways. So to me, it's like there's a fixed context to life, which is the physical realm. And then there's a context that is less fixed. It's man based on man's attention, is in some sense the subjective value. Okay, that in some sense there is one fixed objective context, but there is so many different subjective ways, so many different subjective contexts. Okay, I can imagine myself being on Earth right now. I can imagine myself being in outer space right now, right? My body is only on Earth though, but my mind can envision situations that go beyond the paradigm of what the outer realm shows. So we're not just physical beings. We got it wrong. Okay, they got scared and wanted to reduce it to the only visible dimension. What we actually are is an awareness that has an ability to, before moving the biology, identify with a subjective embodiment. There are human beings right now giving their commentary about the world state, the state of the world, about the outer realms. I don't know how many there are talking about it in the inner realms. Usually people who talk about their inner realms, especially when they get deep, it's otherworldly. You're listening to someone concerned with with the function and the conduct of 8.1 billion inner realms that are giving meaning to their outer realms. The title is simply suggesting that we haven't experienced the united species yet. The only last time we experienced that was the first group of humans that grouped. That was like the first reference point, let's say, of a species. Like it was just like a bunch of people. That was it. Okay, and they were united. Right now, the state of human order, human reality, is like the aftermath of a divide and conquer strategy. In the outer realms, humans all over the planet have prioritized their individualism. Okay, and of course I understand that historically people didn't care to look at each other. Now people are looking at everyone in various ways. What I'm saying with the title is it occurred to me the opposite, that if right now we see a fragmented, a distorted humanity, I'll give you an example. We humans stabilize our psyches usually individually. What does that mean? That means when you go and ask someone who they are, they give you one answer. They don't give you multiple answers, right? They just give you one answer. They stabilize, they solidify their reality into an idea. But I'm saying that just like that, I want you to imagine not about the psyche, the inner realms, or the psychology of human identity with a singular identity. I want you to imagine not about just human identity. I want you to imagine humanity's identity. What I'm saying is, I want you to imagine every human being, every member of the human species, for now the biological, every member of the human species, imagine is the part of a content of the mind of the whole species. Okay? What this means is that if you've wondered about the identity of a human, it's not that far-fetched to wonder about the collective identity of a species. You know, in the same way you have all the cells in your body being you, how would all these humans be the greatest potential of humanity? You're listening to someone talking about that. Okay? I have lived in this world 12,500 days. Every day value is based on the past. You look at someone, they're like, okay, what is it? What did this person do? Who are they? The value is just based on past to present. Do you know? And you realize they kind of, like, it was such a diabolical strategy. Like, if I want, like, if somebody, like, you know, there's the saying that, like, you know, the greatest generals already know how to defeat themselves. Do you know? In the same way, right, you got to know, like, counter arguments to your position. Do you know? It's like once you build something, if you want to really build something strong, you got to try breaking it. Okay? Anyways, where I'm going with this is I'm saying when you look at human identity, we look at, let's say we look at one human mind, and that human mind identifies as an artist, for example. Okay? That's an identity, okay, for that individual. That individual is living in the identity of an artist, for example. Okay? Now, if that person, their psyche fragments. Now, artist is more like a role, okay? But I'll say it this way. Think of it in this sense. Let me see how I can organize my thoughts here. Think of it in this sense. In psychology, there's this concept of the fragmented psyche. Um, People might be like, psychology, bro. You know, like I had that attitude too at some point. But what I'm telling you is that this notion of a fragmented psyche is very key, because they've conditioned all of us to think that we're one individual character living in one storyline. Yet the behavior of the mind is not like that. Okay, the way the intelligence is behaving is not matching the way they explained it to all of us. Okay, that's what I'm saying, right? And it's not something to blame someone. Yo, did somebody deceive us? No, no, I simplify it. I don't care about even conspiracies. It's just you're on a planet with a bunch of beings, and you're left to whether they know better or not. That means my attitude is Like there was a time I used to believe I have like enemies and even friends to just to the degree that I only thought what I saw was in them, you know? But later on I realized no, we're dealing with the complexity of how a moment of being is being human. Okay? To me, the honest position is an unknown awareness is present, an unknown force of awareness, and my human body is within this, yo. I log into the day, my eyes open up, first person point of view, seeing my hands. Do you know what I mean? That's all there. But where I find my physical body is in the presence of my subjective experience. And this is when all those atheists and materialists who are like, yo, bro, I got to see it to believe it. It's like, yo, that's not an issue. The issue is who is seeing it. Where are you seeing it? Everybody's like, prove to me that this is true. And I'll be like, excuse me, what the F kind of question is that when we consider, even scientifically, ladies and gentlemen, we consider that we have access to a small percentage of the observable reality. Only a small percentage of what's going on here is observable. Okay, and somebody gave a ratio to it, this astrophysicist in this podcast. She said something in the lines of, if the whole cosmos was I think this is, I don't know exactly what she said, but it was something like, she was saying if the whole world is like the size of the whole cosmos, is like the size of the, you know, ocean, okay, the oceans of Earth, all that humanity has discovered so far is a cup of water. And there's a reason, guys, scientists don't like philosophers. Do you know why? Philosophers are fearless in resetting the context of reality. But most human beings, their context is their fixed context is their life. Do you know? Now, anyways, the whole point of it is there will come a day where, the scientific community will realize how valuable philosophers are, and they're going to be like, how did they figure this out? They'll be like, suddenly theoretical physicists realized it was theoretical. Knowledge is not hard, guys. You're just seeing a species, and this species has found a system, a technology, a method of organizing reality based on a past considerations of organization. That's really what knowledge seems to be, right? Now, I'm going to go further with this. The whole point of it is I opened up this notion of the fragmented psyche. Now, what does that mean? You might think that if I come up, let's say somebody comes up to you and says, who are you? And you give an answer. Let's say, I'm this guy, I do this, I do that, I was there, like whatnot. But the point I'm trying to make is you have never been one moment's expression. This is the truth. This is what most people have trouble acknowledging. Your physical body is not even the same body. The cells in your body have been changing every 2 weeks. Cells in the brain maybe take longer. Do you know? I guess depends on the lifestyle. But where I'm going with this is I'm saying a person is not one instance. They're not just one moment. They can't be defined by just one memory. They are that unknown viewing force that has been logging in and out every day of this conscious waking state and accessing a certain human range of reality. That means you are not one of your memories. Therefore, if you give an answer in the present, that's like only one moment. You are the accumulation of your observable moments, and trust me, you don't just remember, a person doesn't just remember, how do I say it? Like, they don't just remember the scene, the visuals of the moment. Sometimes I remember, like when I hear like my own past talk, sometimes I remember what I was thinking then in the inner realms. That means it's not just an outer realm memory trail accumulation and recording. Do you understand? You've been living an inner life this whole time. Your inner life is more unknown than known. Your outer life is more known than unknown. But when you realize it's also unknown, when you realize the whole show is unknown, when you realize having faith in God was another way of saying, how can a conditional being have faith in the unconditional? There's only one answer, folks. Unconditionally. That's the secret. If anybody's like, yo, man, how do you get out of this simulation? I'll be like, buddy, you got to notice the unconditional. Now, this is where, from the Islamic perspective, the geometry of what I'm saying, that there's a system admin beyond the world room, that is an Islamic notion also. But it started from Abraham. So in Islam, I guess there's this view that what Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, Ibrahim, started was what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, completed. There's a reason Muslims consider Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the seal of prophets. Why? Because he pointed to the greatest possible conclusion that inevitably we're left in, right? That mankind's Abraham and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, were both pointing to. What all the prophets have been pointing to is that, hey folks, you're imagining a four-dimensional reality. You're basing reality maybe on two dimensions. Most human beings are dualistically functioning, interpreting moments. Either they like it or dislike it, good or bad. It's so simple, you know? But I'm saying, like, it could be there's deeper dimensions. There could be secrets that what are secrets of the square are, let's say, normal understandings of the cube. Like, the dimensional difference is also an access. For me, the way I started mapping reality was, I began fascinated not by knowledge being like a passcode of an ideology. It's like, oh yeah, this viewpoint is the only viewpoint. No, no, no. It's a matter of, before you input, how do you see the output? And there is no reference point. All human beings in any moment of their life have an access to what I call the raw source code of the moment. Do you know what that means? That means if you your whole life have been thinking that you are a person on a planet, I am telling you, it seems that there are more advanced states where you are not limited to just that day's sequencing of the content of your moment. You start living through the realization that the moment is present before the idea of you owned it. Okay? And you become free from the enforcement of ideological conditioning, even doing it yourself. Where I'm going with this is simply, I'm saying this: a person is not just one identity, okay? Their expression is singular. What they are is like this sphere of awareness, imagine, and all this content of the lifetime in the conscious waking state has been passing through. Do you know? That means it's layered, guys. There's layers to this. I'm not even joking. They're like, yo, man, what's the meaning of life? I'm like, you're asking me something that is so complex, yet simply present. And the only explanation for that will just be the realization of one's limits. You know? Okay, somebody asked an interesting question in the chat section. First of all, somebody says, how do you know so much about the unknown? This might sound strange, but it's like I've been waiting for people to ask that. Okay? But the honest answer is, that if I look at what's been psychologically going on in my life, it has been a discovery of what I am not what I am. That means, strangely, I'm not standing here in this moment being like, I know everything. But it's like I'm someone who notices, a wall is just a wall, not the end of the world. Let me tell you how I perceive myself, okay? And this will give you an answer. Like, it's experiential, okay? That means right now, I have a stabilized known self, and I'm communicating through that, do you know? But the answer to that is that I was having experiences in my youth from the beginning that I was dismissing because my mind was conditioned to think only in a certain way. So let me tell you a story that is both my answer and it answers the question, how do you know so much about the unknown? I think even whoever you asked that from. This is a story from like long ago. It's a Sufi story, okay? And I'm not a Sufi, I'm just somebody who believes this reality as a system admin and it's a simulation, and the only way out of the simulation is through a relationship with the system admin. But the system admin is unconditional, so that means you gotta become responsible for the unconditional. If the whole species does that, that seems like getting closer to the activation of the most advanced potential of the human species. Because it's not just envisioning, oh man, what if everybody was a guardian angel? No. Guardian angels are guarding something. What are they guarding? That means the whole species is guarding itself. It singularizes into a grand identity. The whole of humanity, right? What I've been trying to say here is trying to tell you that you should start thinking. Look, when you think about things in life, you shouldn't be like, I'm a person in a world and I'm thinking about things. Like, no. You should be like, okay, I am activated. The moment you wake up, the moment you just notice you're a breathing entity, you're present. Now, it's up to you how honest you want to be with yourself. That means I know so much about the unknown not because I know anything. It's because the unknown is where it all started from and where it all returns. It's the unavoidable. Like, trust me, when I was young, I wanted to be a soccer player. Like, it's not hard to want to zoom out into one fun simulation inside, a bigger simulation. But anyways, I'll tell you this story to honor your question. Back in the day, there were these 3 dervish friends, okay? That means like, and like God-conscious people, okay? These 3 friends, okay? These 3 friends, one day in their town, they see it's something strange. A giant wall has appeared, and everybody's just silently in their homes, right? So these 3 friends, when they group up, they're like, yo man, this random giant wall is up there at the edge of town. Let's go see it, okay? So the 3 friends, as their group, they go there, right? These 3 friends are walking past the wall and they're all like fascinated. They're like, yo man, how can a wall appear? What is this? One of them's like, bro, are we in a dream? The other one's like, no man, it's like I'm touching the wall, So they're all having these discussions until they see a ladder, this very thin ladder that is going to the top of the wall, and it's just there. Out of these 3 friends, one of them, the spirit of the pioneer, finds him, okay? And he's like, guys, hold the ladder, I'm going up, And they're all excited and whatnot. So this is very important detail in the story. That 2 of the friends hold that ladder, that giant ladder going up that giant wall. The first friend goes up there, sees the other side of the wall, and the 2 friends from down there are just looking. And this friend that is seeing this, okay, sees what's on the other side of the wall, doesn't say a single word, just instantly jumps on the other side of the wall. The two friends are looking at that and being like, whoa. Now, this is the next important detail in the story, okay? The two friends, one of them who has, like, let's say, has a big heart, you know, at first, one of the friends is like, yo, man, we gotta go check, you know, and the friend's like, you know, the third friend's like, all right, you go, you know, and one person holds the ladder and the second friend goes up the wall. The second friend goes up this random wall that had appeared at the edge of their town, and what he sees on the other side is actually a paradisal dimension. It's a heavenly dimension. He sees heaven, the garden of paradise on the other side of the wall. And he's about to jump the second friend, and his conscience comes in, right? And he looks at the third friend and he says, yo, man, the first friend is all right. On the other side of this wall is the garden of paradise, literally. And I'm jumping into, and he jumps. The third friend is standing there, still holding the ladder. And if I was in the situation of the third friend, you know, I relate to this story. The third friend who's holding this ladder, okay, realizes he's the last one left. There's no one to hold the ladder. So much uncertainty. And of course, he takes a few steps, then comes down and finds a bunch of heavy rocks and like stabilizes the ladder 100%. And then he climbs the ladder. As he climbs the ladder, he goes to the top of the ladder. So he goes to the top of the wall. He stands there. Suddenly, heaven, divinely authorized heaven, reveals itself to him. And he's standing on a wall on earth, but he is seeing the garden of paradise, you know? And what does the third friend do? Right before he listens to the intuition and everything in his mind telling him, jump, you're gonna complete your everything, you know, jump and go to heaven, right? Go to paradise. In that moment, what he does is he says, whoa, there's the garden of paradise here, but the world should know. Everyone should know. And he climbs down the ladder. Why do I relate to this story? Because there was a point in my own inner life that it wasn't difficult to separate the value I was getting from my experience from my just physical objects and subjects I was identifying with. There was a sort of, I would say, global conscience. Suddenly, think of it this way. I'm somebody who gets bored quick sometimes, ideologically. So I have, like, it's my hobby to kind of like, just like how there were hunters back in the day, I hunt for new perspectives and new ideas all the time. Like, being in a state of fascination is like a victory for me. You know, if I find something I'm fascinated by that day, that was a good day, you know? So for me, think of it this way. This shy, introverted guy who suddenly colossal questions began arising. Like, I was visited by giant questions. Where is everybody right now? What are we all doing? What are the layers? Why is it so many? Why is there in countless ways we can look at the system? How do you choose out of an infinite multiple choice? Does the moment require a higher agency? What if there were greater levels? What if life was a video game? Who's standing? Who's actually playing the video game? Where is that original reality? My mind found the depth in one dimension, and everything suddenly had that depth. Okay? And it was like, I'll tell you, two ideas have had an incredible impression on me. That means I'm a student of two perspectives in my two states. Nobody's probably spoken like this, but I am like, I wouldn't say I have had teachers in the outer realms. I would say I would say that I was too busy noticing how my state of consciousness was being me at all. And you suddenly discover qualities about your own nature. It's like this phenomenal thing that if your whole life you've been identifying with your ego and identity, now your ego and identity is getting down to is exploring and discovering what it actually is. That means we're conditioned in a really subjective, limited life. It's about that grander experience of life, you know? I'm telling you this, we all know so much about the unknown. You're being an unknown force right now. Nobody has your DNA on this planet. We don't know what's going to happen in the planet. I put a lecture as the main lecture on my channel for everybody to see because I wanted the idea of United Species Day, United Species Council, a united species. Our flag, we have one flag as the human species, and it has the picture of the DNA on it and the solar system. Do you know? That's it. We unite the human era. Do you know? That means it's like, to me right now, I'm not like, some, like, in my science fiction I write a lot about this archetype of like some sort of celestial general with an armada or something. It's like there's depth in advanced missions fathomable by an entity's capability, right? What I'm trying to say is that sometimes I look at what's going on here on this planet and I'm like, yo, if I was a strategist, what would the strategy be? And Civilization 2.0, I think I have created, that's what the name of one of my important books, you know, that the greatest, I have come up with an outer realm strategy, but the inner realm strategy has to be explained because it's not now, but give it like, I don't know, 3,600 years from now, they will confront beyond the language threshold or the conceptual threshold. That means today we are humans in history. Today we're fully biological organisms that make mistakes, that are foolish, that are silly, you know, that have humor. Do you know what I mean? That have fun and are playful. Right? Today we're like this. There may come a time in the very far future where they're studying 2026 and they're like, yo, they had it so good. They didn't have advanced AI correcting them all the time. They didn't live in perfect realities. They had struggles that defined them. Do you know? And they also had, how do you say it? States of bliss that defined them. I'm so against this notion that everybody's like, yo, man, it's your suffering that defines you. Excuse me. How are we even interpreting what's suffering or what is suffering when we don't truly know the nature of it, right? So I am choosing to live honestly. And the honest position in my experience is that it's the opposite, bro. Everything is unknown, everything is happening. You don't think about how the blood cells move in your body. It's automated, you know, and you're just thinking about certain things. Consciousness is not like 100% access to the human body. Do you know what I mean? Like a person maybe to do like breakdancing wave moves with their hands and like shoulders or something, you know, but it doesn't mean they can control, like, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like the direction of their blood flow. It's like, you know what I mean? We're not that level. Maybe there was a time in ancient China where they had this concept of maintaining a golden core. I don't know. Sorry guys, I need to drink some water. Give me a second. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna take it here, and say that I was trying to explain to you that a fragmented psyche, okay, is somebody who can't be responsible for the individual dimensions of their life. Okay? And think of it this way: somebody wanted to do something, they were young, they weren't allowed, okay? And now they don't feel they can be an identity confidently, so they identify with any random emotion that comes and they think they have multiple personalities. Do you know? That means somebody says like controlling the people effect. I don't know how you mean that. If you can elaborate, like in the chat section, somebody says that. Think of it this way: you cannot control people. You can control conditional known things. Do you know? Like that's the logical view on it. You know, I can't control like the sun and be like, yo, sun, step back a little, you know, or step like at the right distance, you know? I can't control the sun. In the same way, I cannot control that which is external to me, but I don't see it even as a notion of control, because control means you have to control it 24/7. Who wants to control 24/7? Control is based on the necessity of it. Do you know? Somebody wanting to control everything in life is like taking one attribute and saying somebody wants to be afraid their whole life, or somebody wants to be happy their whole life. Nah, life is designed to be accessed in different states. That's what life is telling us. We can't even fully depend on our linguistic, ideological identity because we're a changing being with changing states of mind. Do you understand? Let me say it this way. Even if somebody wanted to control people, the smartest way is not visible control. Just saying. Okay? And let me tell you this. People, it's not that you can control people, it's the person who chooses what the limits of their awareness are. Do you know? Like astrophysicists are like, yo man, why aren't kids caring about the fascinating findings of the observable universe? Do you know? And why are kids more drawn to fiction? Why, like, this was always a fascinating thing for me. Do you know why don't children, do you know why don't we normalize fiction and children are discovering, you know, the nonfiction for the first time? Do you know, like, to me it's hilarious. You know, the children of this generation, the modern poets say cooked, you know, which I hate that terminology. You know, it's like, you guys are not chefs, you can't use that word easily. You know, only a chef can use that word easily. You know, let's show some chefs some respect, okay? This modern generation thinks they're all cooking, you know what I mean? And none of them know how to cook. That's the irony. They're like, I know how to cook, bro. You know, it's like, yeah, you know, I just downloaded this app called Cook, and you know, I know how to cook, bro. You know? In the future, we're gonna have automated kitchens. You kidding me? The fact that we don't have plates that clean themselves is like a disgrace. You know? It's not about control, guys. It's about vision. And there's way greater games to play. Anybody who's an evil billionaire, there is so much cooler games to play on this earth than controlling people. The smartest thing that any human being can do could simply be to reach this logic that, wait a minute, if everybody lived better lives, maybe it'd be a better world. No way. Do you know? Like, I am just waiting for, you know, like 90-year-old billionaires to like grow up. It's like, no way. It was a species this whole time. Do you understand? Like, I wasn't born at a time where they're like, go and serve this king. If I was born in medieval times, I would 100% just try to make it to the king's council and be like, yo, king, what are you thinking? You know, and the king's gonna be like, yeah, I was thinking of, like, you know, conquering the world. And I'll be like, relax, man. First, you know, get your daughter married strategically. You know, it's like, really. I would probably, if I was like reanimated in a fictional sense back in the day, I probably would be like somebody who would be born in like, I don't know, maybe a blacksmith's. I would probably be a blacksmith's son, do you know? And my mother would work in the library of the palace, imagine. If I was reanimated, I'm just imagining if I was born back in the day. And I would be somebody who knew how to build swords, so I would also know how to use them in the best way. Do you know? Guys, I'm going on such a fictional tangent right now. But anyways, the whole point of it is in this modern time we don't have a higher, greater value to serve. And I was like, man, all these empires in history, you know? It's like the Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Mongol Empire. It's like, all these empires, it was a cry out for help. I honestly think the most powerful humans on earth are all crying out for help deep down. You know? And what that help is them wanting to be released from being a subject that they have just identified with. The advanced human calms down because they realize, it's a changing world. In a changing world, we're trying to like convince ourselves that the stories of us are absolute. It's like it's nonsense. Anyways, where am I going with this? If a person couldn't be something when they were young, their psyche could be fragmented. Children who are emotionally enmeshed, which a lot of immigrant children are to like Western countries, do you know? What it is, or even anywhere, children anywhere, what it means is that if human beings in their early development don't get to feel their own feelings, don't get to notice their own thoughts, their state of well-being is going to still be identified with what's happening outside of them. Do you know? And the whole point of it is of like raising human beings on earth is to, in some sense, how do I say it? Develop the child's character, okay, until the child has a fully developed prefrontal cortex, and to truly see where identity arises from. Because identity is a matter of where your attention is. They're like, yo, man, this person, they asked them, do you identify like as some sort of gender spectrum? And the person's like, nah, man, I'm an inventor. I've been inventing robots and androids for years. And I actually identify as an android, like a carbon android, you know? And then at that point, I don't know, they'll be like, all right, maybe you sit this one out. The whole point of it is there's so many ways to not just conceptualize things but also contextualize things. School teaches you concepts in a fixed world. Mr. Within is trying to teach you context shifting. What does it mean to be free, not just for an objective entity but also a subjective entity? Have you ever thought about it, that you are owning your thoughts as much as they're owning you? Like if I ask you, who do you think is talking to you right now? There's so many answers there's so many viewpoints to that. From one answer, it's, yeah, you're listening to a member of the human species report back to the whole species, you know? And from another angle, you are seeing a soul, which means I have an inner realms that you can't see. I'm trying to vocalize parts of it, do you know? The whole point of it is, guys, I'll tell you something. This is sentimental for me. My grandfather, before he passed away, he was a very great person. He had a very great life force, you know? And he said, when I was young, me and my brother and all the other cousins that were there, he gathered all of his grandchildren and he's like, grandkids, whatever you choose in life, choose the greatest. Just simple words. And all the grandkids hugged him one by one and went back to playing and whatnot, right? But what he said was so deep, right? That I began thinking, if the whole species, let's say, was united, what would they decide? What would the greatest view on reality be? And I cannot tell you that from my whole life has been an effort to search for the most advanced state. I know when I realized that, everything made sense. Because it's also about being time conscious too. People are like, I'm late for work. I'm like, okay, some people are late for what there can be done in the lifetime. 800 years ago, a poet named Rumi, he had a quote that hopefully I'm remembering correctly. He said something like, before death takes away all that is given, or I don't know if it's before life takes away all that is given. I think it's that before death takes away all that is given, give away all that there is to give. That means there's a type of human beings that's like, yo, man, everything I have is defining me. Yay. And then there's a type of human being who's like, oh, yeah, I just snapped out of this view that at some point it's like everything leaves. The moment leaves. Leaves. At some point, this life force that's giving this talk as a live stream right now, at some point I will leave. Everybody leaves. But the whole point of it is, while you were here, what was the most advanced strategy? What was the greatest view? That means think about it. Think of this as a homework assignment, right? That ask yourself, what is the most advanced viewpoint on humanity? And you'll realize we've witnessed humanity's collective failure. We have not witnessed its collective success. The mission quest is right there. If life was a video game, it's about the conscious responsibility beyond one's own individual self-simulated meaning to life, and realize, okay, we're all on the same map. What is the smartest viewpoint? And for me, this is the general, like, fictional sci-fi general approach I have, which is like, what is the greatest strategy on Earth? Unite mankind immediately. Then unite Earthkind immediately. Then start conditioning the species to become responsible as stewards of the universe. That means you're not just responsible for your whole moment of being, you're realizing you are the presence. I shouldn't say you are in the presence of the ultimate. The difference, for example, between Muslims and Hindus, right? Hindus look at the moment and they're like, yo, man, God's everywhere. God's everything. God's within everyone. But the Muslim is very different. Everything is within God's view. You are not God. You're within God's view. I think God view is like a most incredible last name. I'm going to use it for a character on my side. It's like, what's the character's first name? Fictional character's first name, Beyond. What's their last name? God view. It's like, yo, that's beyond the God view. Somebody in the chat section says, maybe we know everything already, we just need to remember. That's very old, white, long beard, sage wisdom, wise of you to say. But that's very, Lao Tzuian way of approaching it. But I will say, I don't think that's the case. Let me tell you why. The urge to want to get enlightened and to know the truth means that you are trying to surpass, you're trying to complete the unknown. If you treat yourself as a conditional position, you're trying to conditionalize the unknown. Okay? I'm trying to say that the species is climbing a staircase of responsibility. It's going up a staircase of responsibility levels. Right now, the species, like I'm the first out of my DNA and lineage to like enter cyberspace, you know, and as a personality. Like share like how I'm a natural biological human being and how I see this world currently, like, you know, it's a sort of archival work I'm also doing. Anyways, folks, let me speed this up. I am trying to reach this view or share this view that we have to be honest and actually confront what's going on here. We call this place Earth, and we will keep calling it Earth as courtesy. But it is now conscious for the human species. Somebody says something about attitude. It's very true. And even realizing attitude comes from your greatest awareness and what vision you find there. Anyways, folks, I wanted to create parallels between how a human being can have a fragmented psyche based on their trauma, based on how they've processed their life so far, or even based on how aware, self-aware they are. A person can have be subconsciously like living based on the past, but actually in the present, they see something different. Do you know? So there's so many different ways to look at it, right? So I'm just someone, you know, I don't claim anything. I'm just saying honestly that I just realized in an unknown world there's an unknown self. This unknown self used language and referencing and memory to know itself. Okay? And now that it's known itself, it's noticing how it knows itself is not just limited to how it's human. It's more like the mind is at the presence of a field. Okay, there is complexities to it. Think of it this way: where I am giving this talk in the human sector, in a humanized sector of this manifest world. Humanity to me, civilization, all human ideas, all human perspectives, they're like a kingdom to me. They're like a civilization. Do you know? I honor it, and I will protect it. Like, you know, it's very important that we realize there's a reason that at our core we're identifying with our physical form, and when we look in the mirror, we see a member of the human species before any idea, before any abstraction, before any us giving meaning to the forms we find in front of our eyes. So yeah, attitude is key, but I'm saying that just if you speed up and think about the future, you will be fascinated how many different probabilities there could be to how something is happening. Anyways, I find that a fragmented psyche is a sign of a soul or a unknown moment of intelligence that is not being responsible for itself, or it's been denied an ability. It's been denied being itself as trauma, and so it doesn't want to be itself. I think sometimes the vehicle analogy of the body and just the intelligence system is helpful, right? It's all about like, okay, a aspect of life is the form, is the life form part, and then the other part of it is the life force part. And really, you most people just plan for their future as a noun, right? They only plan for their known self. But I realize these are clues that the world is more unknown than known. It's a clue that consciousness cannot be explained because it's an instantaneous unknown presence of force. Do you know? At some point, it's like very unknown, and it's like us being responsible members of the human species and guiding the species to not freak out. That as we evolve, we find more advanced ways of being what we are. Okay? I'm just saying that a fragmented psyche is somebody who's just, their identity is emotional, imagine. How they feel is what they're identifying with. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying like it's turbulent. That means if you think about like somebody can live a day being like, okay, I'm this kind of person and I do this, right? Let's say they have a new job or something. You know, they can identify with that one archetype, right? But emotions, if you identify with the emotion that arises, then that emotion has a rhythm of its own. Do you know? It's sometimes when I see people who they say like, yo man, you know, unfortunately, I don't know, it's like, it's weirdly, there's been some people early in the talks who approached like the Discord and they had like psychological, you know, turbulence, right? But it was all about like, okay, a fragmented psyche means that you, a part of you is in anguish. You're like, you don't, it's like you think that you have to be something to be. Not really. It's like you are present as some sort of energy, okay, as a force. But how far can you know it, right? And what is there to know, and what is the responsibility of what can be known? Like, how else would I say it that right now, 2026 is a perfect representation of if the whole species was a person, this would be its fragmented psyche. It's identifying, it's like the species hasn't realized it's one species yet. That our personal narratives are more important than how we're all in the same species class. And that's hilarious to me. Like, it shouldn't be like that. We should be living in honor of the greatness and the advancement of the human legacy. That why else are we human? Are we human to just be some a local cultural function? Should our lives just be defined based on just how we've adapted to one circumstance? The concept of adaptation means you can adapt to new circumstances. And people are like, okay, how does this connect to theology? Think of it this way. God is the notion of an original unconditional being, meaning that all conditions are its command or are adjusted to the absolute being. But we are simulated beings that have to adapt to conditions to survive. And the species is displaying the fragmentation of a psyche, you know. That means it's acting like as if it's divided and conquered. People feel they are like, think of it this way. Meaning is fictional and personal, and what we find in the outer realms, matter, is impersonal. You know, like an artwork is neither good or bad, it's based on who's looking at it. So I'm saying that to realize the world is more unknown than known, to realize that every moment it's like an unknown force interacting with an unknown moment. 8.1 billion human beings being guardian angels of the human species means that the species united rather than just identifying with a chunk of land. We're like, wait a minute, we're one species on Earth. And we need to think in such advanced ways that not only the species united, the species began becoming responsible for other species. We found ways where we weren't eating other animals and we were just awakening organism intelligence on the planet, but not in an artificial way. I am simply, I don't know, I found it fascinating that if humanity was a giant robot and every human being was like part of that robot, part of the crew that was maintaining that robot. To me, I have experienced an individual human identity. I live for the advanced potential of the human species. I have to find honor, and I have decided, I've shared this in other lectures. I honor one, firstly, the original advanced power of reality, which I believe the way I've experienced is an explanation to that unknown, how the unknown moves. In other words, something original within us that feels limited wants to reach a state that is limitless. In other words, it's the urge of something deep within an energetic being to transcend energy conditions. Or a matter of saying pure being within the Pure Lands. But I'm telling you, I don't know, I'm one of those souls that loves the human species' future. That means I just realize I serve the species. One day they'll realize they're all this. They're every person. Their color of blood is red. Their bones are white. Our geometry, existential geometry, is similar. And the fact that we're not all the same, like I never understood racism, honestly. Like now thinking about it, right? That, like, what the F does that mean? The person wants everybody to be clones of them, and anything that is different than them is like something that has to be getting rid of. That's like an illness. That's the behavior of like some sort of, I think, bacteria or viral thing. It could be a psychological illness, right? Because everything is different. Like, why don't people care about hair color? Have you noticed? People are like, wait a minute, I don't care if your hair is white and that person's hair is black. Your skin color is different. Like, that's insane. It's limited. It's limited perspectives. Anyways, folks, I hope this talk was interesting. There's more to say about this, which I will in the future. The whole point of it was to say, what would it feel like? What would it be like if there were 8.1 billion humans that became responsible beyond themselves for the whole human species? How fascinating would that be? Anyways, thanks for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced.